Let me take a moment to review our process and the law, because that might provide some context for the remarks I'm about to make. Number one, our process is, I think, the only one of its kind that I'm aware of in California, if not other states as well. We review the facts of the case with the law enforcement investigative agency very carefully in deciding what charges to file. Once those charges are filed, if they present the opportunity to seek the death penalty or life without possibility of parole, we then contact the defense attorneys to give them an opportunity to speak to us and provide information on their client so that they might be able to give us additional information which would help us make our decision. We, of course, in our county, at least in the last 4 years, have also contacted the victim's family and had taken the opportunity to discuss with them in all details whatever it is they'd like to discuss, and we solicit their opinion on what penalty we should impose. Then we sit down and have another meeting with senior staff. Our senior prosecutors have handled many death penalties, myself included. And we review the facts of the case again. We review the defendant's background. We review the victim's background. And we review any and other facts that may be relevant to that consideration. At that meeting are representatives of law enforcement. And, of course, we also ask them what their opinion is and what penalty we should select. The law requires us as prosecutors to review aggravating circumstances and mitigating circumstances. We have done so in this case. We've looked at the defendant's background, which is an aggravating, has many aggravating circumstances in it. We've also, aggravating circumstances include prior convictions, prior felony convictions, and any act of violence, whether or not that act of violence was prosecuted. We've reviewed all of those things in making a decision in this case. And then we've also had many discussions with the defendant's own family members, siblings, relatives from all over the United States, who can provide us some insight into the background of the defendant and whether or not he, for example, suffered abuse or suffered in any other way mentally or physically throughout his childhood. That's typically the background of a death penalty case, and so we've done that as well. In reviewing all that information this morning, we were struck with the obvious decision that had to be made. It was a decision that ultimately the district attorney makes, and I made that decision today, and we will be seeking the death penalty against Mr. Green. It was not a close call for us. It was overwhelming for us. We, of course, listened to the family. We are terribly sorry for their tragic loss. Officer Bonaminio was, it is fair to describe him as a hometown hero. He grew up in this community. He served 2 tours in Iraq and served our community well and our country well. And we were fortunate to have his service both locally as well as for the nation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Rob,
Yes, sir.
What are the chances of death penalty being carried out? As you know, it just doesn't happen very often here in California.
It's about 25 years wait. There are tremendous delays all along the way. And the question that every district attorney has to face when faced with a case like this is, do we really want to go down that road? And so the conversations we had with the family were a full explanation of that road. I mean, it's a very tough and painful road for families. And quite frankly, victims are forgotten during the appellate process, and we spend so much time and money on the defendants, and I'm not suggesting we don't make great efforts in that regard, but the victim's family is almost always forgotten. You know, the bottom line for me in making decisions like that is, what is the just thing to do? It is not up to me to fix the death penalty process, even though I've made many efforts in that respect and hope to in the future, but, you know, it's about justice. I could be very practical. I could say, look, we can go life without parole, but that would not be right, and that would not be fair, and that would not be just. And so I make the decisions that are presented to me based on principles rather than those practicalities.
How does this change the way your team prosecutes your plans for a trial, if it does go to trial?
It's very different. I've tried both regular homicide cases dealing with life without parole as a punishment, as well as death penalty cases. Life without parole cases get to trial much quicker. There are much fewer delays in our local court system. As you know, as I think we all know, The delays are extreme anyway for any case, but a death penalty case, it only makes it longer. Death penalty cases can last as long as 8 years before they go to trial. We had a case earlier this year in January involving an 18-year-old girl, Stephanie Benton, who was killed by 2 white supremacists, and that case took 8 years and had over 100 continuances. The record was abusive, unfortunately, but that's an extreme example. In addition to that, the trial itself, it typically takes longer to complete. A life without parole homicide trial takes maybe a few weeks to a month at the most. A death penalty case, in my personal experience, takes 3 to 5 months to try. Sometimes they can be a little quicker, but they are extensive propositions. And now, in our county, we use 1 lawyer. Of course, we have investigative support for that lawyer and other support, but our lawyers handle them individually, has been our practice. Mike Hestron, as you know, was handling this case. He's the best trial lawyer this county has, and he was specially assigned to handle this case.
You said the Stephanie Benton case took about 8 years.
Yes, sir.
The trial, I think Euler took about 6.
It took a long time.
In this case, longer, shorter, any guess?
Well, you know, I said it before. I'll say it again. I said it at the last press conference. You know, it's going to be up to the individual judge. Whoever this case appears in front of has to make decisions on continuances. And I have encouraged the family to be at those appearances to express their opinions about those continuances. I think they have strong, thoughtful voices that a court would want to hear from and hopefully be guided by. This case can last 10 years, or it could get to trial in 1 to 2 years. It's up to the judge. We can make all the objections we want to continuances, but ultimately the judge makes the call. And so it would be dependent on the judge. So,
If convicted, do you expect him to eventually be put to death, or do you think
I do. No, I do expect him to be put to death. You know, there's been a lot of talk about the death penalty as kind of a futile punishment because the defense attorneys have been so exceptional in retarding and contorting the process to allow, or to prevent, to prevent individuals on death row from actually being executed. I mean, it takes 5 years for a person on death row to actually even get a lawyer, sometimes even longer. The continuances in that realm with the Supreme Court are extreme. They are over and over and over. It takes years for the first brief to be filed. And there's really no good reason for either of those 2 things, as well as the other things, to happen. There's no good reason for that. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I've handled these cases. It has become casual, and it has become convenient, and it has become comfortable to handle these cases in that respect, and it serves the purpose of anti-death penalty advocates to drag these things out. And unfortunately, there are not enough people pushing on the other end. Hopefully the family and our prosecutors can push on the other end, but there really needs to be a statewide solution. Now, I've spent time working with others to draft a death penalty initiative. We have that draft available, but in order to get an initiative on the ballot in California, it takes about $2 million. It would have to be a constitutional amendment, in my opinion, to prevent inappropriate changes in the future, but I think it can be done. I've talked to folks about providing some funding, and we're going forward, hopefully, on that 2012, but that's going to be a challenge.
Court documents have shed some light on exactly what happened more than you were able to release at the last press conference.
Sure.
How would you describe exactly what played out?
Well, you know, there are limitations on what I can provide to you. You know, we're not supposed to try him at a press conference. We're supposed to try him in court, where he has an opportunity to defend himself and ask questions and produce evidence. And so we're going to honor that responsibility that I have. But there is significant evidence in this case, and it's very clear to us. One of the calculations in any death penalty case is, you know, what is the evidence supporting the charges and how close that is. You know, again, it was not a close call in this case for us.
So you believe you have a very strong case?
Yes, an overwhelming case.
You talked to some of the members of the family members of the defendant.
Yes, many.
Many, and in some accounts that they gave, they described him as someone who either threatened them or other members of the
Yep.
Can you characterize what their take on this was?
Well, briefly, there was kind of a mixture that we got from the defendant's own family members. And I would tell you this, hypothetically, in my personal experience, professional experience, when you have a person of significant violent propensity and criminal inclinations, they don't just pick on strangers. They typically prey on their families. You know, one thing I will say is that the folks that we talked to in the defendant's family were very decent folks, and it was a tough situation for them, and of course it was for us, but they seemed to us to be very normal, decent people who didn't like the treatment they received, and several expressed condolences for the death of the officer, which was the decent thing to do. And folks like that tend to prey on their families probably more than strangers.
When it comes to this decision in January, there's someone new here in the office. Was Judge Zellerbach talk to you about your decision, how he would like?
You'll
input?
have to ask him about that.
Did you discuss it at all with him?
No, it's not appropriate to do that. He's a sitting judge, and that would be unethical for him to engage in that behavior, and we wouldn't put him in that spot. He, of course, can make any decision he wants come January 3rd, and he could change it if he wants, and that would be up to him. He could change all the decisions that have been made, but that's up to him, and I guess you're going to find out when January 3rd comes around. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You talked a little bit about making changes in the death penalty and
Yes.
pushing on a campaign. Is that part of your post-January 3rd agenda now?
That's very kind of you to be actually concerned about my future, but I really, this is not the appropriate place to discuss that. And but to answer your question, the answer is no.
Rob, Mr. Bongdaniel, care to comment about the death penalty?
Well, I think you'll have an opportunity to speak to him afterwards, but I would say, if he doesn't want to, apparently, but I would say that, the family, which I would have preferred to have met under different circumstances, is a wonderful family and was unanimous in their recommendation to me that we seek the death penalty.
How many resources going forward are you guys going to allocate? I mean, this is probably going to be a very extensive research, investigation, and also...
Well, whenever we handle and I'm going to, I'm going to give you the long answer, unfortunately. I apologize. It's my predilection. Whenever we have a death penalty case in this office, we commit ourselves to it fully. And if that involves resources, then it involves resources. And, it's not about the money part of it. It's about getting the job done on a very difficult, tough road. Now, when someone murders in cold blood a police officer in our county, there is no more significant case. There is no greater effort that we will take in the murder of a peace officer. There will be no stone left unturned and no resource left on the sidelines. Any other questions? Thank you.